Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Yet another day of snowstorms, another day of shoveling, another day of ice and gloom. But you take the good with the bad. Anyway, I decided to be here to talk a little bit about a process. I just had a lovely 2-hour meeting with my team, and we were talking about all the functional and non-functional requirements for the Shelley testnet, and just making sure that we'd captured everything properly and the things we've learned from the sprint retrospectives were there. And at the same time, I got this lovely report from Route 9B. It's the first security report that we have for the audit that they've been doing on the new code. And it has within it the good, the bad, and the ugly. As with all audit reports, they give us time to clean everything up. And then the report that gets released to the public is usually a report of good health, meaning that all the things they found we fixed. But that's the point of an independent security audit. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we build software. And I think it's important for people to understand the distinction between us and the industry as a whole. So in the beginning, there was Bitcoin, and there was just this loose white paper. It wasn't very long. It didn't have security proofs. It didn't have an adversarial model. It just kind of explained what Satoshi was trying to do. It explained a little bit about how the protocols worked and a little bit about the philosophy of what he was trying to do. And that was paired with some C++ code, which was not so good. It was filled with lots of curious design decisions, a lot of inspiration, a lot of sweat, tears, and blood, obvious. It's probably worked on that code for at least a year or 2 years before bringing it to the general public. And for its time, it was a revolutionary idea and product. Well, the industry has evolved a lot over the last 10 years, and it's gotten to a point where real people, governments, corporations, everyday people are making multi-billion-dollar bets on who they're going to go with. And the capabilities of the ledger and the capabilities of the system really need to be at a scale that Bitcoin could not accommodate, or Ethereum cannot currently accommodate in the way it's being built. So when we started the Cardano project, we said, well, let's write software differently, and let's think about science a little differently than how our industry thinks about it, as opposed to writing some white paper or just writing some ideas down or saying, here's the code, enjoy it, it's specified there. We said we're going to start with the peer-reviewed scientific process. So the first thing we did is that we hired a large group of scientists, and we asked a lot of really hard questions, and they started thinking deeply about security proofs and adversaries and security models, and deeply about what had been done and where original innovation needed to exist. Now, that alone at the time was a major step forward, because it had not simply been done at a large commercial scale by anyone in our industry. Now we're starting to see that with David Chaum entering the space, and Sylvia Macaulay entering the space, and others actually hiring real scientists, writing real papers, including Ethereum, that's no longer a core distinguishment. But we didn't stop there. In 2015, we also aspired to have this concept of formal methods. And this is something that very few software engineers in our space fully understand or appreciate the value of. So basically, what a formal methodology is where you say, okay, let's write down in a very specific, detailed, rigorous, mathematical way what we intend on doing. What is what? So we have this concept of Ouroboros, and there's many flavors of it. But what does it actually mean to go from these dry, dead papers that our academics have written to something that an engineer can look at and know with absolutely no ambiguity that what they have created matches the intent of the authors of the system? So basically, you have to write a specification for this, and specifications can then be analyzed in a rigorous way for correctness. And you can use all kinds of techniques like model checking and SAT solving and so forth to verify that your specification meets some sort of collection of design requirements or tests. So we chose to go down this road. And unfortunately, most of the time when you write software in this way, it adds years to your roadmap. And that's exactly what happened with us. When we went down this road, we had to hire, in addition to a bunch of scientists, a bunch of formal methods experts. And then we had to figure out how to do formal methods with cryptocurrencies. And at the time, no one had actually done that before. There were some products and projects, for example, Zen Protocol and There was some work being done by Meredith Patterson and others, some Scala projects here and there, where there were particular things that had some rigorous formal proofs or methodologies or the use of dependently typed languages. But again, there was no project scale effort. When we started in 2015, that actually embraced the concept of formal methods. Now, we have seen some people since we've launched, for example, Tezos, famously, and their use of CAWC, embracing the concept of formal methods or trying to involve formal methods somewhere in their methodology. Russell O'Connor also did some great work at Blockstream with simplicity and writing some proofs that simplicity is done correctly. So they have formal semantics there. And Grigory Roshu has done things like the KEVM project and so forth. So our industry has seen the use of formal methods. But we at IOHK, we were the first to use peer review. We were the first to use formal methods. And really, we were the first to build a pipeline that allowed us to go from peer-reviewed work to formal methods to actual code that is tested with things like property-based testing, and to do that in a way where we can move fairly quickly. So we call this evidence-based software because you can see the chain of custody and evidence flowing through. And we've written several blog posts and we've done several videos about this. If you go to the IOHK video series on our YouTube page, where you can actually see Duncan Coots and Philip Kahn talk in exhaustive detail about what evidence-based software is and how these things work. Well, that is what we can do on our side. But it's incredibly important to understand that there's what IOHK, the company, can do, and then there's third-party validation that we've actually done our job correctly. So this is why it's so incredibly important to have things like an independent security audit, and it's also incredibly important to have the peer review process done, because you need third-party verification that the science was done correctly from people who do not have a financial interest in an opinion one way or the other. And you need a third-party organization that puts its reputation, brand, and credibility on the line, saying, we have looked at what's been done, and we agree what has been done is accurate, is secure, or meets a certain set of standards. Now, we're also starting to push this into our product management and our product planning pipeline. So for the first time ever, we've gone from kind of sets of project charters and project documents that we've had for the past 3 years to a consolidated universal set of scope and functional and non-functional requirements. This document that we spent the last 3 weeks cobbling together from all the other source documents and the GitHub issues is now almost 100 pages at this moment and only covers the scoping up to the Shelley testnet. And every single iteration thereafter will have similar documents to that. So underneath the surface, there's really a heck of a lot of things going on as a project. And oftentimes you guys don't see that. You just see the output of this. And there's also room for experimentation, prototyping, user experience, and talking to your customer. So all the things I've mentioned are, again, IOHK or the auditors of IOHK, whether they be independent community members or they be firms we've retained or others have retained to do work. But then there's also this question of, did we actually get it right? For example, the release of the incentivized testnet. The incentivized testnet, the core point of that was to have a broad discussion with the community about the experience of staking and why staking is important, the business model around staking, to understand how the Ouroboros protocol actually works and so forth. And this is why we chose to use a rapid prototyping approach that we can change things on a weekly basis and play around with a lot of ideas and configure things quickly with our community to accommodate that experimental edge. And this was the point of the incentivized testnet, which allowed people to do something with stakes. And we have had overwhelming participation and overwhelming support from the community in that respect. This is another vital tool. These things combined together are what I feel makes a great software project. And it's taken quite a bit of time for us to pull these strings together in just the right way and communicate them in just the right way. And we haven't done the best of job as an organization at being as open as we needed to be about how these things are working and how we think about these things. We've been very myopic, ivory towered, and insular at times. And people tend to forget that all this stuff is actually happening. Now, those who pay very close attention can see the progress, and they can see it in the GitHub repos. In 2019, we were the most actively developed project by GitHub commits, real meaningful commits of any cryptocurrency, including Ethereum. We were number one, and we'll probably maintain that velocity, if not more so, in 2020. And in fact, we're coding faster today than we were last year in February. So it just gives you a sense that we're really moving in that direction. Now, a lot of stuff is going to happen over the next few months, and you guys are really going to start seeing the fruits of these labors in very productive ways. This month, as I mentioned in my last update, we're going to have the OBFT hard fork tentatively scheduled for February 20th, and with any luck, we'll also get the Byron reboot code out this month as well. That is the first product of this incredibly rigorous adventure that we've gone on. And it's really our proudest work that we've done as a company in the entire history of our company. It's the fruit and labor of dozens of people from over 10 different companies through over 2 years of careful planning, discussions, and conversations. And actually, if you want to see what it's all based on, if you go to our GitHub, the input-output HK, you'll see a repo called Cardano Ledger Specs. And that's really the basis for the design of what we're launching this month and what will be launched with the Shelley testnet and the Shelley mainnet coming soon. Now, right on the back of this Byron reboot launch, then we'll start turning on the Haskell testnet. And there's really two phases to that. One is the phase for the stake pool operators. And really the point there is to help get the people who are currently registered and doing things on the incentivized testnet over to the Shelley Haskell testnet, which is the production product. And that shouldn't take too long, and that's probably 2 to 4 weeks of effort. But then after that's done, then we'll release the consumer side, which is basically for the balance check, which means that all the rewards that you earned if you participated in the ITN plus your current balances, you should be able to verify that in that second iteration. And once those two things are done, burnt in, and we feel pretty confident, then it's just a matter of strategic planning and what is the ideal date to launch the Shelley mainnet. Now, we're not done after that. There's a huge amount of things that have to occur. For example, we're planning on a major update of Cardano docs, and we're planning on a litany of supporting infrastructure to be available at that launch, from multisig to a ledger update and so forth. And a lot of experience things need to be pulled out. So everybody's working overtime right now. And in fact, our organization's under the most stress it's ever been because of so much delivery focus that we have. And people are really working within their lanes and their sprint structures. And I'm incredibly proud of our employees for the hard work that they've put in. And I continue to be amazed by just how productive people are being and pragmatic people are being, and their willingness to go above and beyond just their job role and their station to ensure the product success. But very shortly thereafter, then it's the Goguen show. And what we have to look forward there for Goguen are really a pursuit of 6 different things. There's an effort for multi-asset. There's an effort for identity we're calling Prism, and we'll be making some announcements there. There's an effort for oracles. There's an effort for handling metadata that flows through transactions, so that can be used effectively. There's an effort for development experience to make sure that when people want to write Plutus applications and Marlowe applications, that they work very well and they work with the tools that people would like to use. And then finally, there's a thread for Ethereum interoperability. So that's a huge chunk of work, and there's a lot of parallelism. And there's still going to be Shelley work going on as we are doing the Goguen work as well. So there's lots of updates that will be coming. In fact, every month to 2 months, you guys should be seeing some major update or major release for the coming months. And it's very important to understand that these are the fruits of years of effort, not things that we've recently been doing. The team has been working religiously towards these ends. In addition, we're going to start transitioning the ITN work to start working on Basho. And Basho, we are starting to get final specifications and ideas of how we want to integrate this into Goguen, on top of Goguen. And we'll be making some announcements at a later date, but we'll see that work beginning likely in March to April to work in parallel with the Goguen and Shelley streams. And the Voltaire work is also underway with the Cardano Foundation and us. And of course, we have to coordinate with our partners. And we've had to do original contributions to Haskell as an ecosystem for our partner collaborations to be effective. For example, for over a year, we've been funding work on the GHC.js project, and we've been funding in partnership with Twig work on the Asterius project. Now, these projects respectively are to compile Haskell to JavaScript and to compile Haskell to WebAssembly, meaning that Haskell becomes as portable as languages like Rust and C++ and C, which is incredibly important for the success of Plutus. And it's also important for the Adrestia project for portability of our software. Adrestia is basically a collection of Explorer functionality, libraries, and the wallet backend that allows people to build wallets for Cardano, allows exchanges to list Cardano, and also allows people to do things like cold staking and staking as a service and so forth. And we have been working with several exchange partners to completely rebuild the experience of listing Cardano so that there's one unified, stable experience for Cardano across all exchanges that is secure. It is enjoying that same level of quality that the rest of our software has, and it is as portable as possible with the ecosystem frameworks that people enjoy using. Again, this is a Herculean task because we're dealing with more than 30 entities when we talk about that, and more entities coming soon. And there's a lot of people that want to do third-party work. Now, another task, and this lives in the Volterra range, and it's something the Cardano Foundation is taking the lead on, is how do we evolve the Cardano protocol to go beyond where IOHK has taken it? We have left a process and a methodology for quality. We have created a systematic way of saying if you do science, the science must be peer-reviewed. If you write code, the code must be well-documented, tested, developed in a formal methods approach, and subject to third-party security audits, such as the one that we've done with Route 9B and Kadelsky Security prior to that. That said, when we look at improvements to our protocols and to our ecosystem, you can really break them across two different dimensions. One dimension is an improvement proposal to protocols, and the other dimension is an enhancement proposal, adding new functionality, features, or potentially growth factors to Cardano. So in the case of an improvement proposal, in my view, the easiest way of accommodating this through saying we have a formal specification and let's update that specification to a new specification. For example, if you go to the GitHub repo, Cardano Ledger specs, you can see things like the delegation design specification or the Shelley specification or the Byron chain specification. Now, clicking on any of those links, like I'll open up the delegation design specification, for example, you'll see that this specification is over 50 pages long, and it's filled with a lot of mathematical formalism. In my view, for a Cardano improvement proposal to work properly, it's probably a good idea to have a discussion of how do we take that specification and transform it into an updated specification with some breaking changes or non-breaking changes. And basically an explanation of how that happens. So that's kind of the protocol level, and that will address soft and hard forks, and that will address how do we evolve our current set of ledger rules, consensus rules, network logic, and other things to its newest form. And that can be done in a decentralized way. And eventually those specifications and the reference code for those specifications can be self-hosted within the Cardano ecosystem. So we would not be reliant upon platforms like GitHub, but rather we can control the things that are necessary in-house, and we can put all the democratic mechanisms on Ledger. Now, things like enhancements to the system, that can be everything from how do we get more adoption in Ethiopia? Maybe it's a good idea to build an ATM network throughout Addis Ababa, or perhaps the government of Mauritius wants to start putting some of their voting infrastructure on the Cardano blockchain, but they need a grant to do that. Now, these do not require mathematical formalism. Rather, they require the goodwill, grace, and judgment of the community of whether this should be a funding priority to enhance the ecosystem, ultimately to appreciate the value of ADA, to increase the adoption of ADA, and to promote new use cases for ADA. So part of the CIP committee at the Cardano Foundation is to explore both of these broad mandates. How do we, in a structured way, improve these formal specifications, ideally living within our system, to get to the next state, into the next state, and create some notion of a reference system that is code independent, it's based on mathematical formalism. So if you write a C client or a Java client or a Haskell client, you'll be able to verify that you're following a single source of truth. And then on the other case, these enhancement proposals, which are much more subjective and they're much more opinionated, and they're not based on mathematical formalism. Rather, they're based on principles, such as, is it a good idea for the community to get involved in this, or is this a feature that we should have, or is this an enhancement we think will add value to our ecosystem, and so forth. And the goal is to put both of these under a single democratic system, so some sort of voting mechanic, and to attach the treasury mechanic to these. This is the point of Voltaire. Now, there's a lot of science and a lot of engineering that goes into the nuts and bolts of building a good voting system and the nuts and bolts of building a good update system. So over 2 years ago, we applied for a grant from Horizons 2020 with a consortium of members such as IBM Research and GuardTime, specifically to study decentralized software updates. We were awarded that grant. It was over $500,000 for IOHK's component. And our Cypriot entity, Input-Output Research, actually has been executing since that time with a dedicated team specifically to study this end. And we've already produced a 39-page paper specifically on how to do a decentralized software update. This, combined with research we're doing at Lancaster University for the last 3 years with Bincheng Zhang, who has produced several papers, including one at NDSS, combined with work we're doing with other organizations and the foundation is doing, constitutes a lot of the mechanics and nuts and bolts, so the design space of things we can do. But this will not substitute for community participation. This will not substitute for incentives to participate, community engagement, these types of things, which are required for these mechanics to be successful. So there's a lot of learning we're going to have to do. And thus, because it's so complicated, I've authorized the hiring of a dedicated product manager to come in and manage these work streams from IOHK's end. And there is a product manager on the Emergo end, and there is a product manager on the Cardano Foundation end who will work together to ensure that these things consolidate and we come up with a pretty reasonable system before the closing of the year to handle both the improvement proposal and the Cardano enhancement proposal side of things. So there's a functioning governance structure with funding behind it moving into 2021. The good news is that once the bulk of the Shelley work is done and Goguen work is done, the entire team will be made available to implement this treasury and voting system. And it should not require substantial changes or enhancements to the Cardano protocol to be able to implement a base system, because many of these things can be done as layer 2 solutions. Many of these things can be done through more centralized means for the first version of the system. So the scoping of it can be scoped up or down based upon time and monetary commitments from the actors involved, as well as the participation of the community. Whereas other systems, for example, Goguen and Shelley, were significantly more involved and complicated. And another important thing to close out, that we are starting to reach the end of the first generation of research for Ouroboros, meaning that we have solved or are about to solve or closing out most of the problems that we outlined in 2015. So we started with the GKL model, which now has nearly 800 citations and is one of the most successful academic papers in the history of the cryptocurrency space and most cited papers in the cryptocurrency space. And then we systematically worked our way with Ouroboros Classic, Prowse, Genesis, Chronos, and soon to be Ouroboros Hydra and other Ouroboros flavors, a corpus of theory about proof of stake as a problem. And we are no longer in a position where we have these big open unresolved academic questions. We're now in a position where the science is done and we're moving on to the explanation phase of the science, meaning we have to tell people what we've done and why what we've done is so revolutionary and amazing. So at the launch of Shelley, we'll be at Ouroboros Prowse, and then we'll systematically update the protocol from there to reflect the remaining learnings that we have had as a consequence of the research we've done. Now, there's a lot more things we can do with Cardano and a lot more things we can do with Ouroboros, but the point of having the improvement proposal process, the enhancement process, and so forth is to leave it up to you, the community, to decide where to go next and where the priorities are next. Nothing would make me happier, doing another 5-year stint and taking us to the next level and taking us to the stars with a satellite network and other cool things, and funding permitted, we'd be well more than willing to pursue those ends. But at the end of the day, for this to be a true cryptocurrency and a truly decentralized ecosystem, you have to be in charge, and you have to decide as a community what the priority should be and who should be the stewards of the ecosystem. One of the closing thoughts I'll leave you with is that when we started the incentivized testnet, our wildest hope was to have 100 reasonable stake pools running, and we thought maybe we'd get 50. I found out that we're almost at 1,000 registered pools, and we think there's no end in sight. We have a very firm belief that what we have started is an engine that tends towards decentralization, not centralization, while it does not have to give up performance, and it does not have to give up coordination, meaning that we have created something that, if left to its own devices, once completed, will tend to become the most decentralized cryptocurrency in the world, yet still be able to govern itself, sustain itself, and be able to deal with threats, internal and external, to its existence. This is no small feat, and we are proud of what we've been able to accomplish. There's so much more to do. There's so many more threats to deal with, but you can only do so much in one book. And this book is slowly coming to an end. We will have completed the roadmap as best as we could, sooner than you'd think. And as we turn these things on and we close the chapter of years of work, it's really been an incredible privilege to do that. And I look really forward to the next scope of work and the next thing. We've already begun brainstorming ideas like post-quantum VRFs and, as I mentioned, the satellite relay network and so forth. And the sky is really the limit when you start allowing your imagination to brew. Furthermore, I'm really looking forward to all of the use cases for the system. We really do have a shot at replacing the world's global payment and settlement systems with what we've accomplished with Cardano. Furthermore, we really do have a shot of redefining what the transactions of the future, regulated and unregulated, should look like. We really do have a shot at making meaningful and significant contributions to computer science, like what we'd started with semantic space compilation and what we started with things like recursive snarks, not only in-house, but with partners. And we really do have a shot at building increasingly larger coalitions to utilize our software. Now, on our side and on the Emergo end, we've already begun aggressive conversations with partners and with commercial endeavors like our work with PwC to talk about how we can create use cases and commercialization of Cardano as a technology. And there's no lack of people wanting to go down that road from both a project and a funding perspective. So we think we'll have a lot of adoption. But to me, I think the definition of success on that end is to point out that we can really rebuild everything. In fact, when we had dinner with the former Prime Minister of Georgia, we weren't just talking about things like payment systems or the credential system. We were talking about what would it take to rebuild an entire country on a blockchain basis. As we saw today and yesterday with the disaster of the Iowa Democratic Caucus, even in the richest, most developed nations where we do things over and over again every 4 years, we seem to not get some certain basic fundamentals like voting right. And now we have a shot to rewrite how these playbooks work. The technology we've built with Cardano not only enables this, but enables economies and enables society to be built on a system where power is pushed to the edges, your identity becomes self-sovereign, you own your own data, and you own the fruits of your labors. And it's your decision how and where you participate in the economy, instead of that being spoon-fed to you. So to me, it's so incredibly important that we begin exploring those ends and we move beyond the science and we move beyond the engineering and we move into these use cases to definitively answer the question that everyone has been asking of our industry and demanding our industry justify. Why are we here and what are we providing to the world? The last 10 years have been so exciting with Bitcoin, but they've also been so incredibly frustrating because the technology could never live up to the potential, the promises and hopes and dreams of decentralization. For the first time ever, I think what we have built with Cardano and the process that we're following can actually allow us to live up to that potential over the next few years. And we have built within the system the capacity to make sure that no matter what happens, the system over time will continue to decentralize, will continue to self-govern and be sustainable and scalable to meet those ends, regardless of how many users are inside of it. So thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it. And I, again, do appreciate the patience. Things are, as I've said many times, starting to move where we need them to be. And it's really cool to see that we've been able through the last 5 years to keep our principles, keep the community together, and to keep things moving straight forward. The next few months are going to be very busy. They're very stressful on our end because we have to launch a lot. But they're also going to be the most exciting months in our company's history. So thank you for being with us. And I can't wait to announce when we're going to Kyoto and hopefully see as many of you as possible there. Take care.